baby boomers.
I used to be with it.
Millennials.
Okay, boomer.
Generation X.
What's going on?
And Gen Z. What do they have in common? Not a lot, it turns out. But one thing they can agree on is that this is the political podcast they want to listen to. Welcome to Not My Generation, the political podcast that looks at political events, news, and happenings across the world and at home through a generational lens. Your hosts are Dr. Emily Stacey and Professor James Davenport, two political scientists from Rose State College. But the views expressed on this program are solely the views of the host and their guests and do not reflect the views of Rose State College, its administration, faculty, or students. Coming up on today's program.
The national average is 181 days of school. The Oklahoma average is 166. The worldwide average is 207. So you talk about falling behind our peers, not just our peer states. You could deduce we're last in the country. The United States is pretty much last in the modern world. So Oklahoma is last in the world.
And now, here are James and Emily.
Hey, Dr. Sharp, how are you?
Doing great. Good to see you.
Excellent. So James Davenport is not here. I'm very excited that, of course, my academic dad is back with us today, Dr. Brett Sharp from UCO. So Senator Adam Pugh is with us today again. He is a regular at this point. I think this might be your third or fourth.
Third time.
Okay, yeah. We love you, particularly me. So this gentleman is now in the running for state superintendent. We've got some juicy things to discuss over the next, little bit that we have him. But thank you so much for coming back and just letting me pick your brain.
As we joke, senators get paid by the word. So
Amen.
So you give me a microphone and let me just freestyle for a little bit. I'm happy to be here.
You may not remember this, but I did a research project with Rick Farmer, and we doing a legislative study. It's basically his thing, but I had sent out all the stuff, and you were there like, can I help? What can I do? And, so I appreciate that. That was a few years ago.
Yes. Yeah. Well, thank you. I didn't have as much gray hair. It was earlier in my legislative career.
No,
obviously.
I think you still are very Marty McFly, right? You're still,
Yes.
I remember.
It's one of my favorite movies.
I know. No, you're still fabulous. So I'm going to lob you some softballs first.
Okay.
Just, we haven't seen you in a minute.
Yeah.
So how are the kids? How's the fam?
Oh my goodness. So I've got now, let's see, 8th grader, 5th grader, 2nd grader. Right. And, my 8th grader is now, and I've said this before, right? You get to middle school, become a horrible human being. 6th grade is awful, by the way. Parents, if you're listening, just prepare thyselves. But she's an 8th grader. She's super sweet again.
Good.
And it's really funny.
At least to dad. How's she with mom? Yeah. I'm worried about that. I've got a 6-year-old daughter.
Yeah, I tend to be the disciplinarian.
Oh, okay.
Right? And my wife is like the sweetest person on planet Earth. And there are times where I'm like, okay, like Sarah, like I need you. This is your battle now. Like I need you to be the bad guy. I'm tapping out. And so Sadie's doing great. I've got a 5th grader, Amelia, who's like classic middle child, like completely oblivious kind of, happy to just like, she can play with the 8th grader and kind of hang with her friends, but she can also, play with my second grader, and they're really close, and she's awesome. And she is a phenomenal soccer player.
Oh, great.
Oh, cool.
Which has been really fun. Like, it's getting to the point now where I'm like, do we have a game this weekend? Like, I get so excited to go watch her play. It's so fun. And then my little man, Charlie, who now is like into all things dad's into. Yes. So it's like, Dad, can we just lay on the couch? Can we play Transformers? Can we, Dad, throw the ball with me? Let's talk about airplanes. It's really fun.
Little mini-me. I love it.
Said best title I've ever had, Dad, right? Especially for me, growing up without a dad, like I just cherish every moment. And there's often times like without getting like weird about it, like I'm like, why did my dad miss this? I'm like, this is so fun. Like, it's so cool that, raising kids, it's like, I love my family. And I say that because I know some people who don't, and I'm like, well, that's kind of sad. Like, I love coming home. I love hanging out with my family. And so thanks for asking. I could talk about my kids all day long. Like, I'm in that stage of life now.
How old is your youngest?
7.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
Evie will be 7.
yeah,
in March.
I'm an older dad.
Same, right?
yeah.
And that's I think that's why
I
I
was
like
41 when we had
my
my last kid, and I joke with my wife, I'm the oldest dad at the elementary school right now.
Same.
And 3 years from now, I'll still be the oldest dad at the elementary school.
Oh, I'm sure you still get ID'd everywhere. Just looks like a teenager.
That is amazing. Well, good. I'm glad to hear all things are going well with the fam. Soccer dad. I love that. That's fabulous. Championships and away games are, I'm sure, in your future if she's doing that well.
Yes.
Very good. Anything else you want to tell us about the family before we get into the politics of it all, my friends?
No, just, now that I'm running for statewide office, like this is going to be the challenge, I think, and it's true for any candidate. My challenge will be the balance of I still own a business. Obviously, I still have legislative responsibilities that the people of Senate District 41 elected me for, and I'm going to be there this session to represent them. But, between balancing my, statewide candidacy, and I've already been to every corner of the state, and there's been times where it's like, hey, sweetie, like I can't make it to pick up Millie at soccer practice tonight. And so that certainly is a challenge. And, but it's also a wonderful experience. We were driving to Seminole the other night, and I told my wife, I said, how cool is it that we get to drive our state and go meet people who don't know us and are willing to like show up for an event and invest in my campaign? That's pretty cool. And I don't ever want to take that for granted.
Exactly. Yeah. Ugh. It melts my heart. That's why so you've got a public servant heart, and that's something that I really respect, regardless of ideology, partisanship. It's something that it transcends, it exudes from you. And it's just something that I think I texted you in the middle of session, whenever, and we'll get into this, but whenever you were standing up to the Walters social studies standards, and just again reiterated my just admiration for you and just the heart that you have for
maybe you should get Dr. Stacey to do your commercials.
Seriously.
Testimonial here.
Bygones. I would, sir. I told Dr. Sharp. We're serious about this. We're serious about a Superintendent Pugh, my friends. So let's get into legislative session first. Let's get into Senator Pugh first. So tell me about 2025. How was this last legislative session? Difficulties, accomplishments?
Yeah, it was our first year with 2 brand new leaders in both the House and the Senate. Now, they were actually both, I would consider them friends. Obviously, Senator Paxton, I'm very close with his family. I know him quite well, but also Representative Speaker Hilbert. We all got elected together. So we've known each other. This is now the 9th year in that building that we served. But it was, I think, there was some feeling out of, leadership styles and what were going to be the priorities now, because especially in the House, you had Speaker McCall, 8 years as Speaker. And so we were kind of anticipating a drastic change in kind of style and priority. And so I think, like any leader, it takes a while to figure out your organization and the people you're leading and serving with. And then you started to get the weird dynamics that were already bubbling of the next election cycle, right? Sure. The governor candidates were already out, right? And kind of swinging away at each other. And so that kind of creates interesting political dynamics inside the building. Overall, we had some things I was very proud of, some things I, regretted that happened, but that's true for every session. What's interesting is you never know when you walk into that building in the beginning of February, okay, what's the battle going to be this year, right? Who knows? And I always said, politics is just downstream of culture. So we kind of just, things happen in society, and generally things then happen in Washington, D.C., and then Washington, D.C. does it, and then states start doing it or reacting to it anyway. And so it took on its own forms. And this year this coming legislative session will be no different. I don't know where the fights are going to be, but they'll come.
They'll come. Yeah, no doubt. So the fight, your main fight, and really everybody's main fight, honestly, was that which was known as, or formerly known as, State Superintendent Ryan Walters. Full disclosure, Trey Savage, non-doc, was one of the media outlets that was involved in the board meeting, heard around the world, et cetera. So we just like to kind of mention, those things. But in terms of the social studies standards fight, why did you oppose those standards?
Yeah. So I want to be clear here because it's important because I took probably a different route than a lot of people that were kind of discussing the standards, right? My fight was never on the standards themselves, not because I agreed with everything in the standards, but what I wanted to make sure everyone at least understood my perspective and opinion was you don't want the legislature writing standards. That's 149 different opinions of, well, what does second grade civics need to look like? And, what should fifth graders be reading in their literacy, program? And we wouldn't be able to accomplish anything if we left it up to. So I never wanted the focus to be on any particular item in the standards themselves, right? What I was much more kind of focused on was the process, right? We have a clearly defined process of how it was supposed to work. And there were a lot of people, at least optically, superficially, whatever the term is, patronizingly, brought to the table, teachers and experts that were brought to the table to be a part of that review process until they weren't.
Right.
Until the changes were made at the last minute, until the board wasn't looking at the right information, or at least didn't have the information in a timely fashion, wasn't really allowed to ask questions. And that's really where I kind of focused was, hey, I don't think this process is right. There was some partisanship certainly in that because some of my colleagues were more focused on, well, the standard. Well, I agree with the standard or I disagree with the standard. I'm like, that's fine. But how did we get here? I don't think we got here using the right framework. And so it just got to a point where I went to the pro tem of the Senate. At the time, the governor had even had a press conference where he said, hey, just send them back. This seems like it didn't work. Like no one really knows what happened. And he said, just send them back. Yeah. And so I went to the pro tem and said, hey, this is our opportunity. Even the governor agrees. And this is our opportunity. And so I filed the bill to just send them back. Again, not getting into specifics, but saying, relook at this and use the framework that's already provided in statute. And then really the gloves came off. And unfortunately, it became a political battle instead of a policy battle, instead of a process battle. And even then, the governor kind of retracted his statements, and I won't spill all the beans of the way we had a closed door caucus meeting, got a little crazy. Superintendent even showed up and came in and spoke, and at that point, it just seemed like I wasn't I had stormed the hill, but it was an unsuccessful mission. So yeah.
So is that so your procedural objections, would that have been perhaps setting up a precedent or a slippery slope for other agencies perhaps to make legislative or admin rules by themselves effectively?
Yeah. That's, I've had a front row seat over the last 3 years to the previous administration in the State Department. And that's always been a concern I've had is we are usurping, legislative and statutory authority through this administrative rulemaking process that seems to be beyond what I think they're given by their constitutional authority, whatever it might be. And it's different for every agency and certainly different for every statewide elected official. And where really I think administrative authority comes into play is the administrative authority is to kind of create the details around the law, not to create law or not to act counter to the law, right? And where the law is silent, maybe that's where there's supposed to be some collaboration. And hey, the law is silent here. What do you think if we did this? Or we are still meant to approve all the administrative rules, but just like the standards, that's a process where it became partisan. It became kind of a political battle, unfortunately. But I think we should always be concerned. And Dr. Sharp, I'll let you weigh in, but I know Dr. Davenport had very strong feelings about executive authority and executive overreach. And you may just kind of attach that to the president, the governor. But in our system, at least in Oklahoma, it's the entire executive branch that has this administrative rulemaking authority that I think sometimes is outside the bounds of what the legislature has authorized.
So Dr. Sharp is OPM, all things expert in terms of admin
I've worked
rules.
for the state for 8 years and did the administrative rulemaking, which is not a fun process. But
It's arduous.
But, I mean, at the time, this was years ago, but at the time we took our cues directly from state law, and it was very conscious of that, very deliberate. So I have had a weird experience the past couple of years, and that is teaching concurrent high school students at Deer Creek High School, which is a fun thing, but it's a college course there. But and I saw the change, where the cell phones were banned, and all of a sudden I could tell a difference in the culture of the class immediately. And these were probably the best of the best kids, and I heard some good things, but I have some concerns about and I don't have any answers, but I think about a lot, and that's artificial intelligence and all these platforms and what is it going to mean. And I have a kind of an invested interest in, these K through 12 students and what they're getting. So what's percolating in your brain about how the state or even the national government, what kind of policies would you think are necessary to help deal with that?
Yeah, great. So I served on a national, I think they called it like a blue ribbon task force on AI standards in education. And it was focused, there's only one state currently that's adopted any sort of AI standard, and that's Oregon. I'm hoping that we'll be the second. And what our plan is to incorporate it into our computer science standards. Okay. And
what grade does that start?
Well, pretty early. We're thinking somewhere in elementary school. I don't know exactly where that is yet, but and it starts very simple, right? You can teach an elementary school child, hey, if you use Netflix, there's AI. Now it's really more of a data inventory, right? Oh, if you like this show, here's another show. Same thing with Spotify, right? Is another perfect example. But that's a great way for a very rudimentary understanding of what is AI, right? And then so building some standards, some national standards around what is AI, right? What is ethical use of AI, is certainly kind of built into those standards. I think when you get into the high school level, now it changes. It's how do I leverage AI, right, to do things for me? Prompt engineering, I think, is going to be an entire discipline, right? At some point in colleges of engineering is going to be prompt engineering. How do you kind of manipulate these AI tools and, software suites to, produce the outputs or the outcomes that you're looking for? What's interesting is that one of the gentlemen that was on our kind of national task force was the main brains behind the Microsoft Copilot. Okay. And this was his thing. About 70% of all administrative tasks should be accomplished through AI. Now, I think that freaks people out when you hear that, right? Because you immediately think replacement of humans with bots, right? Or something like that. But I think there's a second part to that never gets discussed. It frees up the human to do specifically human things, right? If I'm spending less time formatting templates or summarizing notes that I just, came from a meeting, or doing things that aggregate large, data sets and sanitize them, right, and scrub it, then I can do the specifically human things, which I don't think AI will ever be able to get to. Sure. AI will allow the, I think, multitasking, but I don't think it'll ever get to a point where, the kneecap to kneecap, face to face, high level thinking, of some sort of AI, instrument will ever replace a human. And I think we need to talk about that because people are nervous that they're just going to be replaced. I think it will ultimately lead to, you might need to be upskilled or reskilled, right? Which should kind of be the entire point of our economy anyway, right? Exactly. You insert yourself at a low level of whatever your current experience and aptitude, but you don't stay stagnant there, right? You grow, and hopefully your employer invests in you. You invest in you. You seek new opportunities to advance yourself, and you don't stay stagnant. I think this will accelerate the necessity for that, but I hope people aren't so fearful that we just in whole reject AI. I think there has to be, where can I insert it and leverage it, but understand that it's not going to replace the high level human functions that I need for my company to be successful. And we're, by the way, I'm speaking personally because I've got an aerospace company. We actually have an AI/ML tool that scrubs maintenance data from airplanes and, can do it much faster than like a flight line mechanic who's just thinking, how do I make sure this airplane can fly, as opposed to looking through millions of lines of data off of an aircraft engine or something like that. So I'm living this just like everybody else.
That's very interesting. Yeah, I am of the mindset that AI has to be incorporated into learning pretty quickly. And I think your Netflix example is perfect. My child totally recognizes, right? She found K-pop Demon Hunters finally.
Oh my goodness.
After 2 years, man, I was good. I was like, we had avoided. But yeah, AI, man, it's, I think, so what you're really discussing is a knowledge-based economy. And it's something that I've been screaming about since I met Dr. Sharp 20 years ago. It's something that the United States has been underdeveloped in, certainly, and underinvested in the programming, coding, technological side of things. And we're kind of playing catch up with a lot of our...
Yeah, we're so behind on all the benchmarks, when comparing ourselves to other states. And, specifically with education, it seems like we have a new opportunity to kind of have a new vision. You want to share some ideas that you've got about that?
Yeah.
Yes, please.
Listen, there's some stability that needs to be brought to that organization that I think is occurring at the moment, right? I think the interim superintendent, Lyndall Fields, is doing a great job of just kind of stabilizing, kind of normalizing the communications and probably even opening up channels again where school districts, because for the most part, they were going through me. I mean, I was the conduit of information, and it was even hard for me to get answers to the state from various divisions inside the State Department. But that's one thing, just stabilizing the organization. But that's not what we need. That's a good first start. Right. But what's our vision, right? What is it that Oklahoma needs to do to advance academic outcomes, to give kids opportunities, to create those kind of economic opportunities in the state, so that our smart people want to stay and grow families and start businesses, et cetera. Let me start with something that's really been a focus of mine over the last few years, and I think people are starting to come around to it. Even the superintendent talked about it this week. School time. Yeah. I don't think we're in school enough. And it's crazy to me that I'm having to go
in terms
fight.
Of the day or the amount of days.
How many days? Because what happens is we have a days or hours component, and you can actually play a game on the hours, right? You could be in school less days, but you can add some minutes to the beginning of the day, the end of the day. That's not quality learning time, but you meet the statute in terms of hours. But there is actually science behind what's the right length of a day. How much can a child at different age groups actually absorb? You can't have a 6-year-old in class 9 hours, right. But you could do that and meet the hours requirement and be in school much less. And so just so you know, and for context, the national average is 181 days of school. The Oklahoma average is 166. Yeah, that's what I thought. Yeah. The worldwide average is 207. So you talk about falling behind our peers, not just our peer states, but you could kind of deduce we're last in the country. The United States is pretty much last in the modern world. Exactly. So Oklahoma is last in the world. Yeah. At least the world we're competing with. A lot of room to grow there. Yeah. And it's up to 2 months, Oklahoma versus some countries. Now you do that times 12 years, 13 years, whatever it might be. Different countries have different lengths of time their kids are in school. That means, an Oklahoman, 18 years old, graduating high school versus, let's just say, a Japanese student in mainland Japan. That's 2 years less of learning over a child's K through 12 experience.
That is a really interesting perspective.
why are all the technological advances happening in Japan or South Korea or India? It's like our kids are just not in front of a qualified classroom teacher enough, right? I mean, and so the superintendent even came out this week and said, I want kids in school more. I've been talking about it for the last 2 years for sure, and I'm willing to fund it. Right? Like, I'm willing to say, here's money. I recognize you're going to have to work more. I will fund it. It's that important to me. So
that's wonderful.
Yeah, that's certainly one start. I mean, there's others. I'm happy to talk about, what that vision is for teachers and recruitment and retention. And I just think outside of a parent and outside of the family structure, having a high qualified man or woman in front of the classroom is the most important thing we could spend our money on. That's it. Like, it's that simple. It doesn't matter if that's in a little house on the prairie or if it's in a big, beautiful suburban district with all the bells and whistles. It doesn't matter if I don't have a great teacher at the head of that class interacting with that kid, 6 to 7, 8 hours a day or whatever it might be. So that I think we've got to fix. It's a competitive labor market. The teaching profession, needs to change, in my opinion, the way all other professions have changed over the last half a century. And we need to modernize the way we recruit teachers, the way we incentivize them to enter this profession, how we retain our
Give
best
me a
and
modernization policy, Senator Pugh.
Oh yeah,
Just give me
sure.
one.
Yeah. I'll give you a really easy one, which has probably been talked about, but I think it hasn't been talked about maybe in the right way or with the right messenger. If you're a great teacher, the only incentive for you to really advance in your salary is to stop teaching and enter an administrative pathway, right? Now, that doesn't necessarily translate because if you're a great 8th grade science teacher, that will not make you a great principal. That's a very different skill set, right? But that's where the teacher has to go to get a leap in salary of $20,000 or $30,000. But why not allow a school district more financial flexibility or have a separate pot of money? Say, hey, if you want to keep the great science teacher in the classroom, here's money that you can use to retain them where they don't have to leave the classroom to go get a significant jump in salary. And by the way, it doesn't always translate, right? A great teacher doesn't necessarily become a great, principal. And so, and then I think you also, you look at things like, well, now let's separate, okay, how do you make a great principal? Because I'll argue all day long, people don't quit jobs. They quit people they don't like working for. The data is actually pretty clear, right?
I would agree.
People leave jobs. I think 73% of people who change jobs, it's because of their boss. Now, if you want to pay someone sure, I could stand on my head for $2 million a year. Sure. Right. But that's not realistic in our, in education. And so what is realistic is you deserve a great leader. And who are the great leaders, in the education circle? It's got to be the principal because they create the culture. That's who you interact with every day. You look at my school district, Edmond Public Schools, there's 33 sites. The superintendents, they're running the administrative organization. They're not running Cross Timbers Elementary or Scissortail or Sunset or whatever it is. The principal is. So I'm really going to focus this year on principal training. But from a leadership, an organizational leadership perspective, which is not what they're getting right now. And there are some tremendous programs around the country that are specifically focused on this, like University of Virginia has a really good program where they specifically take school site leaders and mold them into, you are going from, teaching second graders to, now you're leading an organization with 45-year-olds. And that's different, right? That's different than making 7-year-olds listen to you all day long, right? How do I earn their respect? How do I create the right culture? And that's really important because I just think that's why people are leaving jobs. And from the feedback I get from teachers, they're telling me, yeah, actually, we are. We know we're not going to make $1 million a year as a teacher, but I do want to show up and feel valued from my boss. I do want to feel like when I bring a problem to them, that they want to address it. I do want to feel like I enjoy coming to work every day. That's kind of normal things. And, I've got a saying in my company, we treat people to stay, we teach them to leave. And so we want to skill you and give you all these opportunities where you're like, man, Lockheed Martin really wants to hire me, but I don't want to leave because Adam and Maurice at Ready 3, I love working for them. I love being here. And maybe we won't be able to pay the same salary, but we can make it competitive enough. We're like, nah, I think I'll pass on going to work for Boeing or Northrop or Lockheed or one of the other big OEMs. I'm going to stay here because I just love coming to work every day.
Just listening to you talk, the UCO, and it's really a consortium. I'm sure Dr. Stacey's been a part of it, but they have the Educators Leadership Academy, and they're preparing people to take roles like being a chair in a department or being a dean or provost or something. And maybe there's something like that could be applied at the K through 12 level.
Yeah. So that's going to be a focus of mine this year. There's some, I think Alabama is doing that, where they have a state-sponsored like Principals Leadership Academy. Yeah, exactly. And I think it's awesome. And now, again, these things take funding. Sure. And I need to be able to articulate why this matters and go convince my colleagues, we need to invest in this. It's so important. And I'm going to do that. I mean, I'm not going to stop talking about it. And we'll talk about the other things, pay and benefits and the things that kind of get people attracted to career fields. But I think there's so much more than that. And as the teaching profession gets younger, you have to be able to connect with a younger generation that wants something different. My parents and grandparents, they were like, yeah, I'll do the same job for 30 years. Clock in, clock out, and I'll make some money and I'll go home and I'll spend my money, do the other things I actually like. I don't need to get enjoyment from my work. That's not what this generation is looking for. They're looking for like meaning and value and purpose. And if not, they're like, hey, I'm going to Tibet for a year to just find myself. Like that's what they're going to go do. So we need to like figure out how to connect with them and keep them in Oklahoma, keep them in the teaching profession. And that's what that's just some of the things that I'll preview for you that I'm going to be working on.
Yeah, that makes me really excited. The faculty development and leadership development part of things is something that has been woefully lacking in the state for a very, very long time. Say what you want about, like, I'm an old, and I've been in Oklahoma forever. So my entire public school years, Sandy Garrett was the state superintendent. And whatever you think about that lady, she always had the right sort of policies and vision, and really kind of dedicated that entity or department to the progress of children. I would love to, and the leadership of principals and teachers. I think that's such a cool way to start, and you'll have a lot of success with that, I think. That's awesome.
I hope so. You know, coming from a military background, they always invested in their people when they were about to go take, and it was continuous, right? It wasn't just at one point in your career, hey, you're going to go be in charge of a few more people, we're going to send you to a class. It was, no. We're going to spend like millions of dollars over your 20, 30, 40-year career, if you make general, to always have you come back for more training on how to lead, right? How to lead people, how to manage systems and manage processes in an organization, how to do it in joint environment with the Navy or the Marines. And it was like, it stuck with me, that, we recognized that leadership matters. Mm-hmm. And I think we don't do a good job of recognizing that in the teaching profession. I really do think it all starts at the top. It always has, and it always will. It always starts with the leader. And when good organizations have great leaders, they thrive. Yeah. And great leaders don't just lead by personality. They also create a structure that outlasts them. And I'll use the example, and you can tell me to shut up whenever you want. I'll use the example of Apple, right? Mm-hmm. Say what you want about Apple. I have an iPhone. I don't know if you have an iPhone. You have an iPhone. So Steve Jobs was not the best CEO of Apple. Right. Tim Cook is. Sure. Tim Cook is actually a better CEO, but I'll argue that's a credit to Steve Jobs. Sure. Because Steve Jobs created a company and an organization that was able to replace the founder at Apple with a better CEO. That's a tribute to him, in my opinion. What a great leader that he was like, it's not about me. And obviously it was about him. Everybody knew Steve Jobs. Most people probably don't even know who Tim Cook is. But it was such a good company that after Steve Jobs left, it got better because he created a culture that was like, no, we're going to continue to innovate and inspire and hire really smart people and try new things. And so that to me is like what a great organization does, what a great leader does, is they set it up where, it gets better, right? It just gets better. And so, not accepting, I think, Sam Presti from the Thunder said it best. He said, the amnesia of success. forget what you did yesterday. Show up today and let's be better. And I talk about that all the time in government. I'm going to show up every day at the Capitol and say, how can we be better? Right. And that starts with me, by the way. How can I be a better senator, a better colleague, a better dad, a better husband, a better citizen, whatever it might be. And then I can hopefully, press upon organizations that I happen to be able to influence, like, let's be better. And it's not by bonking people over the head and saying you stink. And I think that was been part of kind of what's happened over the last few years is people just felt like, well, I'm not inspired to be better when you just tell me I stink. Yeah. Right? I'm inspired to be better when you edify me, right? Lift up my profession, encourage me, hold me accountable, fine. Right. And there's unique ways to do that based on who you're talking to. And it would be different for Dr. Sharp. You would respond to different things than you would, right, Dr. Stacey? So I think that for me, that's kind of my story is the role of state superintendent is a leadership position. Yeah. And that's, I think, what I'm going to go around the state talking about.
That's so cool. So I'm going to ask you the political question that's plaguing me. Were you considering running? When did you decide to run? Were you considering before his resignation or?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I have to ask.
I was, again, I've had a front row seat over the last couple of years. One thing I did, which I think frustrated probably colleagues on the right, colleagues on the left, is it wasn't my job. My job was, to work with the State Department of Education as the chair, right, of education. Mm-hmm. I didn't need to be Ryan Walters' champion or Ryan Walters' adversary, right? I wanted him to be successful because it's like hoping the pilot is unqualified when you're like a passenger on the airplane. I got 3 kids in public school. Like, don't crash the ship, dude. Like, and so I never was vocal in the media when I disagreed. I didn't feel like that's not my style. First off, right? When we disagreed, I was like, I had a good relationship with him where I would call him and be like, hey, like, man, I think you're wrong here, or, help me out, or I don't think I can be for this. Even I'll tell you, the day he went on Fox News, I talked to him right before he went on, and he called me right after he got off the set. Wow. Yeah. Like, I maintained that relationship with him, not again because of agreement or disagreement, but because I think he respected the fact that I hope anyway, I don't want to put words in his mouth, but of how I always operated in that building. And I do that, that's why if Andy Fugate was sitting here today, we would have a great, robust conversation, probably primarily disagreeing on the big partisan issues, but that's just how I am. And so, but I did begin to become frustrated. I did begin to see that, I think we were lacking the leadership. We were lacking the communication skills necessary when you've got 500 plus school districts that really are relying on you to provide support for them, right? You're not meant to micromanage school districts. Right. And that's why I think that position's so unique and that the title is state superintendent, but you're actually not the superintendent of anything. Mm-hmm. You're the executive director of an agency, right? The superintendents are the 500 plus at local school districts, buying buses, planning bell schedules, making sure the booster club has the table at the football stadium, right? Hiring teachers, making principal decisions, et cetera. That's what superintendents do. The state superintendent, in fact, most states don't call it superintendent. It's like chief schools officer, director of the Department of Education. There's a lot of other titles, but it's generally not superintendent because no kids show up to class at the Oliver Hodge building. Right. No teachers show up to teach at the Oliver Hodge building. Mm-hmm. You're leading 400 plus people that need to provide support to those school districts. You're primarily a pass-through agency for about $6 billion of funding. And you've got to be able to communicate. And then you got to walk the halls of the state capitol. That's really how you're most helpful, right? Is, hey, I've got priorities. I know what needs to happen inside of a classroom, not because Adam Pugh knows, but because I showed up in the classroom and the teachers told me what's going on here. And I said, okay, we can fix that through law, or we can fix that with funding this particular program. And then you walk the halls of the Capitol and you fight for funding and you talk about policy priorities. That's the job, right? The job is not running a school district. And so, yes, I'd been thinking about it for a while. I wanted to get through session and be clear-headed. about it, and not, again, the people in Senator 41 elected me to be their state senator, and I felt very passionate about continuing to focus on that during session. And then when I got out of session, I had some time to be like, whoo, that was crazy. I think I'd like to, try to run that organization and do some things differently.
I appreciate that. And so you sort of answered my next question. It's an elected position in Oklahoma. We have we're a very populous state. Thank God for our Constitution. So why, as an elected position, is the state superintendent or chief of the Oliver Hodge building, why is it so critical in a state like Oklahoma, do you think?
First off, one of my favorite kind of historical quotes is Teddy Roosevelt said, "The worst political document ever written. The Oklahoma Constitution."
Yes, absolutely.
And I don't think he was wrong, right?
It's awfully long.
It's fabulous.
Yeah, I don't think people want their electoral choices taken away from them.
Yeah.
And so I'm very sensitive to that. And so the conversation around should it be appointed or should it be elected, and when you look at other states, and I think there's 38 states that, every state does it different, right. But I think there's 38 states where it's appointed. But in those states that are appointed, the state school board is elected. So there's an internal check and balance inside the executive branch, or the state school board is structured where maybe the Senate has a few appointees, the House has a few appointees, the governor has a few appointees. And so there's a lot of, it's not this monolithic, everyone appoints it and just the governor has control of it, or it's solely an executive branch agency. There's nuance in the way every state does it, but the conversation about, well, it should be appointed, no one's talking about, okay, well then, what about the check and balance on that position itself? Absolutely. That then comes from the school board. Right. Well, let's then look at how the school boards operate in other states. Mm-hmm. And there's lots of ways to structure that. So I think that's going to be a pretty vigorous, a robust conversation at the Capitol this year.
Interesting.
With lots of strong feelings.
Excellent.
A lot of what I hear from you, which I find some comfort in, is this idea of public service and how important it is. And you mentioned the military, and I've worked with police and firefighters, and they kind of model themselves in terms of leadership development. But that's not the message I'm hearing out of D.C. Coming is really devaluing public service. We're going to be cruel to, quote, the deep state on purpose. Yeah. And gosh, I'm so I've never seen that. How do you square kind of your vision with what your party is advocating?
Well, geez, Dr. Sharp.
I was throwing softballs, sir.
I see Peaches is like, ooh, I'm going to lean in and listen to this answer. Yeah, I'm going to be very clear here. Like, I am a very traditional Republican, right? And when I say that, I'm not even like, I'm going to go way back in time. Like, I'm talking like Benjamin Disraeli and Sir Edmund Burke.
You may not know me, but I'm with you on that.
Yeah, like that is kind of where I like to go back, and I love to read historical biographies. That's actually my favorite thing to read. I love to read about great people who did amazing things. And so I've really enjoyed, and I studied political science and economics and history in college. And so it's always been kind of drawn to, history. So one of the things that Republicans have always believed in, like tradition and institutions, right? Because we think it was so important to carry on and shape society through our institutions. And that actually was what informed your governance structure. And so blowing up like your institution. Now, again, we can every day show up and say, how can we make this better? Right. I think that is a very fair way to look at kind of the bureaucracy and government and things like that. But to smash it all to smithereens in terms of like kind of might makes right sort of perspective is a much more like non-Western way of governing, really, right? Like realpolitik kind of like way of governing, where it's like, I'm the CEO and you all are just, you work for me and we're sitting at this big mahogany table and like I pound my fist on the desk and you do what I want. And it's like, I don't think that doesn't work in the long term. Again,
not in a democracy. It doesn't.
And so I think about, why are people, Dr. Stacey probably can remember this, myself and Jason Dunnington, like my freshman year, we did this thing called From Now On, where it was about young people engaging. And we had the first student-led gubernatorial debate in the nation. Was when Drew Edmondson was running against Kevin Stitt. And it was our organization that sponsored it at Oklahoma City Community College. And we both did that because we were passionate about the fact that I felt like modern politicians, maybe more importantly, were turning young people off. Because they're like, look at the way they treat each other. They're like monkeys at the zoo, flinging their poop at each other. Like, I don't want to participate in that nonsense. And I'm like, no. What I told people is, here's why it's important, right? Pay attention to the world around you. Yes, I want you to vote and I want you to be engaged and all those things. But I want to take the politics out of it for a second. Pay attention to the world around you, because this is what I care about. When you see what's happening in the world, what you'll see is people need things. And now you have the ability to bless them with your talent to meet a need. Maybe it's, my neighbor just lost a spouse. I'm a great baker. I'm going to bring them a pie. I don't even know them. I'm going to bless you with a baked good. That sounds so simple. My mom was a baker. She owned a bakery. And so I think that all things of sweet treats and pastries.
Amen, sir.
I'm going to bless you with the talent I have. It's so simple, right? But God gave me a skill, whatever it is. And when I see the world, I get to see where there's need, and now I get to bless people with my talent. You know what happens then? You get blessed in return when you use your talents to serve other people. I was telling you, I showed up last night at the Opportunities Industrialization Center, which is a program that helps adult learners, primarily coming out of very challenging circumstances, get their GEDs. And there were recovering drug addicts. There was a set of grandparents who retired and were getting their GED, widowed spouses, a kid who was a 9th grader who was reading at a 2nd grade level. I mean, as you can imagine, like, the stories were amazing. I was kind of the honored guest, but they blessed me when I walked in that room and I was like, look at the stories here. Like, this is amazing. Like, this is what politics is about. This is public service. Like, it's about people. Right? It's just about loving on people. And no, you're right, Dr. Sharp. I don't look at Washington, D.C. right now and see people who are there because they just love people and they just want to serve people, right? Now, there's a limit to what you can use government for, right? To bless people, right? And I think that is where you get into the divide between what Republicans and Democrats think of what the reason for government existing is. But at the end, like, I don't care about the yard sign. I don't care. Like, the yard sign's not sending you to heaven or hell.
Right, exactly.
Right? I mean, that's just how I feel. What I care about are, like, in my neighborhood, like, do I know my neighbors? Right? Like, are we just blessing each other with our talents? Are we living life together? Right? Like, that to me is what matters. And I do think politics has kind of lost that a little bit. And that's why I talk a lot more about Oklahoma versus DC, because I know the people I work with for the most part at the Capitol. I know their families. I know when their birthdays are. I know, I've had a colleague that buried a child. I've had a colleague that buried a wife and then married someone. We did his wedding when he got remarried in the 70s. Like, that's, I think, the heart of public service. And that's why it's so fun to show up at the Capitol every day and really just tune out what's happening in Washington, D.C. I'd just be like, get your act together, because I want to be able to fly without, like, having to wait 9 hours.
I've got a trip to LA next week, sir.
I mean, so I try not to focus on that, and I hope they'll find their way again at some point.
I think your stories about the OIC and the GEDs that people are getting, that should be part of your stump speech. Yeah. That's pretty inspiring.
Yeah, I agree. What's on deck for 2026? I know campaigning, I do want to give you just a little bit of advice, but I do want session goals. And then I want to get your just kind of, what's your overall opinion? What's the swan song of the Stitt administration? Just kind of, don't call him a lame duck. So we're going to call it a swan song. But in terms of campaigning, love you, and I want you to win. And so I know that I'm sure you've got a great campaign. Like I'm sure like Pat McFerrin, like I'm sure you've got people, right? I know you got the best people. I want you to win. And so I'm glad to hear that you have started to do the treks and because name recognition is really the big deal. I did an interview with the Oklahoman. I was telling Dr. Sharp yesterday, and I told her the same thing, roughly about Charles McCall and Munson. It's name recognition. They're known in the metro. They're known in these legislative circles, but outside of that, they've got 77 counties to trek. And although $4 million has already been spent in the gubernatorial campaign so far, I have only seen just now even Gentner get advertising. It's largely been spent on McCall and then dark money from out of state. And so I just want to make sure that your lovely Marty McFly-esque face is making the trek, because getting out to those rural areas and what I would recommend to you also, is use your homie Mark McBride. If he doesn't get into the race, let's knock on wood now. I would use Mark McBride. I would use him and take him into those rural areas, because he's a king to those rural school districts. So take him, get after it, sir. I want you to be the next superintendent. I honestly believe that it will be you. But I want name recognition. Like, don't get into the Mick Cornett. I call it the curse of Mick Cornett.
No. I joke all the time that nobody knows who we are, right? Like, there's 1,000 people and they all show up at the Capitol at some point from February to May. Those people know who we are. And when you go measure yourself, even in your own district, you're like, my name ID is like 2%.
Right.
Right.
It's scary.
And then we'll go halfway down as soon as I'm not in office anymore. No one will send me a Christmas card or invite me to speak anymore. Maybe you'll invite me on the podcast.
I will always invite you on the podcast.
Yeah. So it is. I was in Sallisaw and Poteau. Spoke at Carl Albert State College, which was great. The benefit for me is I've built a lot of really good relationships as chair of education, not just because of K through 12, but in the Senate, you also oversee all the 25 colleges and universities, the entire career tech system. So I have a lot of really good relationships, and with my colleagues who serve those communities as well. And so it was actually Senator Mark Allen, who no longer is in the Senate, but he's from Spiro, and he invited me to come down, and we spent the day in Sallisaw and Wilburton and Poteau, and I toured the Veterans Center, and I stopped at a little Disabled American Veterans Center and just said thank you, and met with folks and spoke at Carl Albert and met the Board of Regents, and the mayors down there are going to have a fundraiser for me.
Yes, that's it, sir.
And so that to me, and I love that. Like I love people. It's probably the only skill set I have, actually. is just I just love people, and so and that's what this campaign will be about. And it's funny because I live in Edmond and I've lived there for over 20 years. But I actually grew up in a really small town. I mean, I grew up in a small town, about 3,500 people, and where everybody knew each other. And even when I came home from college, everyone knew like the classes I was taking and who I was dating and like, what I was going to do when I graduated and like all and so when I get back into small town Oklahoma, I'm like, yeah, like I know why people live here. Like I know what they want out of their community. I know where the needs are. I know what they care about. I really do. That's not to say I'm a know-it-all, but in the end, like I'm just one of you. I understand your stories. I understand what it's like to struggle, coming from a broken family. And also I know why education matters, because I probably wouldn't be with you today if it wasn't for my own educational journey and attainment. And so that's really what I'm talking about. In terms of the session, I think the number one issue from my perspective for the Senate Education Committee is going to be literacy.
Right.
Literacy. Really, I've been talking about it for a few years. 5 years ago, I started, and it's grown so much. I'm like, what am I doing? I started a literacy contest in Edmond Public Schools.
Okay.
And I wrote with some early childhood educators that helped me. We wrote prompts for every grade, developmentally appropriate prompts around state symbols and telling a story around our state symbols and our state history. And then they have to do some art with it as well. And last year I got over 1,200 responses. I grade them myself.
Oh, wow.
Of course
And then
you
I
do.
go back to the schools and I pick the awards and we have pizza parties. And then I take the winners and I hang it up at the Capitol. I display at the Capitol for the rest of the year. And then families come down. I even had one family from Taiwan who the grandmother was in, and they called me and she was like, my grandmother is here. She doesn't speak English, but she really wants to come to the Capitol and see the artwork and see the essay.
Sweet.
And so I've been talking about this for years. And now people are, really interested in increasing our literacy rates, understanding it's the foundation for learning to take place later on, knowing that, whatever metric you use, we're not doing well. And we've got to get kids on level so that then as they grow, they're not embarrassed. They don't act out, right? They're not ashamed to open the textbook or afraid to read in front of their peers. They don't start chronic that's how chronic absenteeism becomes an issue. And again, kids, once they figure out like what they're interested in, what they're good at, all of a sudden you can see them blossom and flourish and be all God's called them to be. And it's going to look different for every kid, right? The 9th grader who was reading on a 2nd grade level yesterday, who got his GED, and told his story, he's now an electrician and he wants to start his own company. That's like amazing. Kendrick. Kendrick Marshall. That I think is why I'm so passionate about literacy, because I don't think you're not gonna be able to learn and progress and matriculate if we don't get that foundation right. And so people are citing the Mississippi Miracle.
Yeah, I was going to ask.
Yeah. I want to say this. It's not popular.
It's not. I was very curious what you thought.
It's not a miracle, right?
Okay.
Here's a miracle. Jesus shows up at the wedding of Canaan. They run out of wine.
Right, yeah.
He takes some water, blesses it, and turns it into wine. That's a miracle. If Adam Pugh, Brett Sharp, and Emily Stacey are growing grapes, and we run grapes through a process of turning it into wine, not a miracle. Science. Right. They use science. Oh, how does a child's brain develop and learn? What resources does a teacher need to be able to intervene for a child who's not on level? What is developmentally appropriate curriculum? Yeah. What screeners can I use to identify where a child is in their literacy journey? Yeah. All of those things, that's not miraculous. Maybe you could argue the miracle was the Mississippi legislature invested in it for 20 years. Yeah. They stayed the course when maybe, legislatures turn over and they go after some other shiny object. Maybe that was the miracle. But I just impress upon my colleagues, they just had a plan and stuck to it. Yeah. There's nothing miraculous about it. And I say that because it's not a snap your finger and all of a sudden every kid's going to be able to read by next year, right? We can't take a short-term view here. It is a long-term view. Now, there's urgency. Absolutely. Child only gets 13 years, ideally in the K-12 system. Yeah. So we have to have some urgency. It can't be 5 or 6 years for the adults to figure it out. Yeah. But we need to have a plan and invest in it and give teachers the right training and the right tools and resources. And then, you measure how is a child progressing and at what stage are they where I need to intervene or provide summer school or additional resources. How do I grow my teacher cadre with reading specialists and literacy experts, et cetera. So that's going to be the focus and the conversation from the Senate Education Committee. Everybody's talking about, even the gubernatorial candidates were talking about, they all have like an education plan in reading. I did see, you mentioned Pat McFerrin. I saw some polling from Pat that education, almost 3/4. Here's what's interesting for both of you. Republican voters, maybe for the first time ever. Because I'll argue, I don't think Republicans have ever had a good message on education. We've always talked about what we're against.
Yeah, I think that's totally
fair. We never
fair.
actually talked about what we're for and what we want to accomplish and why it matters, right? And so I think for the first time in a while, Republican voters are saying, yeah, this is important. We need to fix this. The state of Oklahoma, for any number of reasons, there's just a stigma around our education system. And as a military guy, I know it from the families I served with that were like getting stationed at Tinker and they're like, oh my gosh, I'm going to Oklahoma and what school district am I going to be able to get good education for my kids? So it matters to our state, right? And we're still a state that has to rely on importing a lot of our talent, right? And so we've got to fix that so that people want to come here, stay here, start businesses here, invest here. And that I think that literacy skill is going to be the foundation of it.
So I got to ask, do you agree third grade retention, or is it, what's your grade level?
Tricky subject.
Yeah, it is. I'm just curious.
If you are, here's what we learned from Mississippi is that retention was kind of the last thing they focused on, not the first. It can't be the first option. And if you're retaining a kid in third grade, maybe they should have been intervened in first grade.
Yeah,
already,
exactly.
Right. So I'm not anti-intervention. I just want to make sure that the focus isn't on intervention, not on retention, right? Because this is what I would liken it to. Retention would be like you're trying to teach a deaf kid by yelling at them louder. And that's not what Mississippi did, though that's what everyone's saying. Mississippi did have a retention clause. Right. But what they actually did was let the kid go to fourth grade, but retain them in their reading.
Right.
And they didn't use the same teacher.
Right.
They got them interventions. In fact, before they actually start, I can't remember if it's third grade or fourth grade. I'm sorry, I don't remember off the top of my head. They actually do a summer school for the kids who are kind of identified already, where they come to school early, 2 weeks early, and they do an intensive summer school right before they take that screener. Right. And so there are a lot of steps that need to happen before you get to retention. And so it will definitely be a part of the conversation as like a last kind of a last resort nuclear option. But I really hope we don't get to the point where the answer is simply retention, because that's not going to teach a child how to read, right? And I worry that instead what it'll do is actually get a child to withdraw, right? Be kind of embarrassed. And so yeah, I think it's going to be a part of a plan, but we got to make sure we're funding the teacher training, we're funding the curriculum, we're funding the screeners and the intervention protocols. It takes a lot of resources, which is what Mississippi did, and philanthropic resources as well. They got $100 million from the Barksdale Foundation.
It's not a wealthy state, Mississippi.
And so yes, I think there's some people that are interested in different components of this, and my job as a chair will be to bring them all together and say, I know you all want to fix this, so let's draw all the ideas on the table and fix it.
Very good. Final question. Just give me what's the swan song for the state administration? What do you think? Are we giving? You can grade him. You can give me what are your thoughts? I'm just curious.
Probably. I don't know if I'll give him a grade, but I think we made some pretty sweeping executive agency changes over the 7 or 8 years, where really, and I know the governor even grew frustrated, but I do think for the most part, the governor had pretty broad power in terms of like agency heads and appointments and directors. What is the lasting effect of that post the state administration? I think will be very interesting. And does the legislature claw that back? Do they regret it? Do they let the next governor kind of have some leeway there? I don't know what's going to happen there. That will be interesting. I do think I'd like to think we're a part of it. And I think this is really important. Politicians love to just kind of take credit for things they did on their own. But, the legislature has been a really good partner, right? The state administration hasn't put $2 billion of rainy day fund like the legislature has, because we have actually showed, control in our ability to spend and save. I think the state administration has done some good things in terms of like talking about the economy, and we've got some big wins, and the economy has grown. I mean, you look at the budget and the investments we've made and, different parts of our economy. I think, the governor was definitely focused on economic wins, probably more so than anything, was focused on economic wins. I do think there was probably unnecessary tension and probably some disregard for like the separations of powers, which is kind of, again, as a traditionalist for me, I think that separation of powers is really important, because I think the founding fathers very intentionally set it up where it's actually meant to be hard to do stuff in government. Absolutely. It's created that way, right? I have a little saying that, when I walk in the building every day, tension is our feature of our system, not a flaw. And I do think at times the governor approached tension as a flaw. Like, well, I don't understand why I can't get this done immediately, or I don't understand why you get to tell me no. And I'm like, well, the system was actually structured that way so that no one person through sheer force of will could come and get anything done, right? So that the House is separate from the Senate, right? George Washington said the Senate are the brakes of government, right? So we're meant to kind of be like, whoa, let's slow down there. And so I think that tension has definitely been a feature of our system over the last couple of years, despite the governor's protest.
Yeah. Be interested. We love communication that goes both ways, not just you listening to us pontificate. We would love to hear from our audience. If you have comments, suggestions, or would like to contact us about possibly being a guest on the show, please email notmygeneration@raider.rose.edu. Do you want to give me a projection? What's the final runoff in the primary?
Here's what I'm going to tell you. Here's what I could say, very confidently. Yeah. I could say this. Gettner Drummond will be in the runoff.
I agree. Yeah. I agree.
I think, the polling's very clear. If nothing else, he's got the highest floor.
Right.
And he is the front runner.
Yeah.
There is no doubt. And I think you could see the ads that are already out kind of attacking him, right? You generally only attack if you're behind.
Yeah.
Right? I'll also say I don't believe any poll because I'm not sure are people honest about responses to polls?
Or are they responding at all?
I don't respond, right? And I'm a really consistent voter and I just don't respond. So I think he makes the runoff no matter what. The wild card in all of this is a Trump endorsement.
Yeah, agree.
I just don't know. Yeah. I legitimately don't know who he would give it to, if he'll get involved. Yeah. I think everyone is kind of like the donkey in Shrek. Like, pick me, pick me, pick me. In the credits, jumping in the background.
Both counting him in the commercials.
Yeah, everyone's courting
It'll be very
President Trump. But I think what's fascinating about President Trump is President Trump might only be able to help President Trump.
Exactly.
You actually, if you look at the way elections have gone during both now terms of the Trump administration, for the most part, he outperforms himself.
That's right.
But I don't know if the party as a whole or those who are closely attached to him actually are boosted. Yeah. By their association with President Trump. And so, but I think still everyone will rightfully seek the Trump endorsement. And will he get involved? I just don't know.
That's the greater question.
Yeah, I just don't know.
He's still got 63% approval rating in a state like Oklahoma. Yes. So clearly it's advantageous, but does he care? I think, does Trump come down from on high and weigh in on the Oklahoma gubernatorial race? Our 7 electoral college votes. Are we? We're not at risk in the House or the Senate, so I don't know that it really matters to him in the long run. It'll be interesting, though.
Yeah, I think it's going to be the most expensive governor's race in the history of the state, probably twofold. My guess is when all is said and done, it's going to be a $50 million race, which is just insane. Sadly, what that'll do for people in my position down, quote unquote, down ballot, is it actually makes it more expensive than for everybody else to try to raise money. It makes it harder. The TV time's more expensive. People probably have some fatigue and exhaustion, et cetera. It's going to be fascinating. For me, as obviously the hopeful next state superintendent, I will be friends with the winner. That's right. No matter what, because I will want them to be successful and I will want to work really well with them and actually know. I think all of the candidates, except for Lisa Haynes.
Okay, yeah.
I know all of the candidates, and I tell them all this: look, I know what you're going through. It's hard. Praying for you, and good luck. Yeah.
It's a slog, man. And you're in it as well. All right. Well, we are apparently 10 minutes over. Yeah. Peaches is back there yelling at me.
Such a great conversation as well.
Yeah, it is. It's always wonderful to have my favorite conservative. And
how do you really feel?
How do I really feel? Shh. And of course, my academic dad. Thank you, Dr. Sharp, for filling in.
Thanks for the invitation.
Yes. And I guess I have to say it because you're not going to prompt me. Don't forget that democracy is not a spectator sport. We will see you next time.
This is Deborah, the resident Gen Z member of the Not My Generation podcast family. Not My Generation is produced in the Possibilities Inc. studio. This episode was produced by Lauren Peaches Keller. It was edited by Santiago Ramones. We'd love to hear your thoughts on today's episode. Send a voice memo to notmygeneration@raider.rose.edu and you could hear your voice on an upcoming episode. If you liked today's episode, please consider giving us a 5-star rating and sharing the podcast with others. You can check out previous episodes on any podcast app and on our podcast website at notmygeneration.captivate.fm, where we also provide our show notes. And remember, you can follow Not My Generation on X, formerly known as Twitter, at NMG Podcast, and on Facebook at Not My Generation Podcast. We look forward to interacting with you soon.